Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Burke County Board of Commissioners pre-agenda meeting for Tuesday, October the 5th, 2021 at 3 p.m. Madam Clerk, all commissioners are present. County Manager, Attorney, Finance Officer present. Let me ask you to silence your mobile devices. If you have any devices that may make a noise, please take care of that at this time. If you come to bring a presentation to us today, please come to the podium and be sure the microphone is turned on. Press the button, red light will come on. And I appreciate you also following COVID protocol today, being socially distanced or wearing your mask. Thank you very much. Item 2 is approval of agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda at this time.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It's all of us, Madam Clerk. We have several items for presentation today. First item comes from Animal Services, Pet of the Month. This will be presented by Caitlin Suttlemeyer, our Animal Services Director. Afternoon, Caitlin.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So we will be presenting a cat and a dog this month at the meeting to promote adoption, just kind of who we have in our shelter, who we feel would make a good pet of the month. So that is all I have.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Caitlin? Seeing none, this item will remain on our presentation agenda. Thank you, Caitlin. Item number 2 comes from United Way, proclamation declaring November 30th as One Burke Gives Day in Burke County. This will be presented by Alan Wood with Burke County United Way. Afternoon, Alan.
Thank you, Commissioners, staff. This will be our second annual Day of Giving. Last year, this event raised $50,000 plus for local nonprofits. There were 300 plus donors and over 400 donations, so some of them gave more than to one nonprofit. This is open to any nonprofit that would like to participate. It is an online day-long event, and we hope to have more than the 31 nonprofits participating this year that we had last year. The Burke County United Way takes care of the funding that's required to set up the website and hold this online event. So there is no charge for the other nonprofits to participate. So we've had a longer run up this year. Last time we really rushed this through and still did quite well. And so our goal is to have at least 10% more. We really anticipate 20% more this year than we had last year.
All right, thank you, Alan. Gentlemen, you've had this proclamation in your package. Any questions for Alan?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wood, just want to understand that the two numbers you have there, the 43 and the 50, is a total of 93 plus thousand that was collected.
No, there was over 50,000 total that was collected. The 4,300 was the fee to that the United Way paid to set this up, create the website. So that's separate from the over $50,000 that was raised.
Okay, but the two numbers raised together would be 93,
No,
or it would?
No, we raised 50,000 total.
Okay.
The 4,300 was the cost, the total administrative cost for establishing this.
It's pretty strong. I just wondered, do we know the number of people we assisted with the donations? Do we have that number?
We don't know what all the other nonprofits use their money for. The United Way's focus last year was to keep assist the school system to keep learning moving forward. We have a new strategic plan with the United Way this year, and our focus is around housing, affordable housing, child care assistance, and there's a brand new initiative that will be announced from several nonprofits around homelessness. So that's where the focus of the United Way will be this coming year.
Well, I think the amount is certainly a nice surprise, and I'm proud of Burke County citizens for donating that kind of money. And Maynard was a bad boy. I don't think I donated to that, but I will take a double note and make sure I
You'll have
donate this.
another chance on November 30th of this year. It's a 24-hour event, and all participation is appreciated.
That's great. Mr. Chairman, I think that deserves an attaboy applause for that kind of money.
All right. Let's give these folks.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments for Alan? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the presentation agenda. Thank you, Alan. Item number 3 comes from the Meeting Place Mission, National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, be presented by Charlotte Eidson. Charlotte, afternoon. Did I mess up your name?
It's okay. It's Idson. It's like the E is silent.
Idson, okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you for having me and staff and everything. I am here from the Meeting Place Mission, coming to speak to you about having a proclamation for the November the 13th to the 21st. We want to recognize that as the National Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week in 2021. The awareness is so needed right now. Definitely due to the amount of evictions that are happening in Burke County as we speak. There's going to be a large number of people affected by that. Last year, I came before you and did this proclamation as well, and I'd like to share that our numbers of homelessness in Burke County have gone up slightly. They are 93 that are homeless individuals here that we were able to record at our point in time. Which is the event in January where we go out to the unsheltered camps and our homeless shelters and transitional houses here in Burke County to recognize and head count how many people are recognized as homeless. Out of those 93, 33 of them were in emergency shelters, which includes the Meeting Place, the House of Refuge, and then transitional housing, there was a count of 5, and then unsheltered was 60. So our work is definitely cut out for us, and just looking at that awareness week, I just appreciate your opportunity, or the opportunity to proclaim that week. As Meeting Place, I can speak a little bit to the total night stays that our facilities have shared. With the Susie Fitzgerald Emergency Shelter for Women and Children, we have had 1,259 nights where someone has stayed and not been homeless. With our Berkmont Men's Transitional Housing, that totaled out to be 1,342. And then with our Faces Family Transitional Housing, that was a little bit over 1,089. So total unduplicated guests, we have served 80 guests unduplicated, so 80 total. In addition to that, with the hunger awareness, total meals provided, which is both breakfast, or all breakfast, lunch, and dinner, is 7,803 meals that we've provided this year up to date. In addition, I'm happy to say that we have housed 28 individuals and families, which is including 11 children that are no longer homeless and are successful to this date.
All right, thank you, Charlotte. Any questions for Charlotte on this item?
Appreciate the good work.
Thank you.
All right, hearing none, this item will remain on the presentation agenda. We look forward to seeing you at our regular meeting, and again, I too as well thank you for all the work that you guys are doing in our community.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Item number 4 comes from the Board of Commissioners, recognition of our tax administrator, and I'll bring this item. This item is recognizing Danny Eisenhower for receiving the Tax Collector of the Year award. And so, Danny, I look forward to making that presentation. And, you know, I think it says a lot that this award is based on your folks around you who nominated you for this, as best I can tell. And so I think that speaks a lot for what you've done and for what you've done for Burke County. And so thank you very much, and I look forward to presenting that. Gentlemen, any question about that recognition? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the presentation agenda. Scheduled public hearings, item number 4. We have item 1 comes from a BDI, Building Reuse Grant for Project T2 and public hearing. This will be presented by Alan Wood, our BDI President and CEO. Alan?
Well, thank you again. This is an existing industry that will be looking to expand and relocate into a new facility or a different facility. The application is for up to $500,000. We do not know what it will be approved for by NC Commerce or the Rural Development Board. So we will apply for the maximum. It does require a 5% local match. This is not in another municipality, so it would just be the county on this particular project. They will be creating at least 30 new jobs, and they will pay more than the county average wage. From what I see, significantly more. We want to have this application submitted to the Rural Development by October 25th, and the approval date is in December. So this would be funded in December of this year. It is a good company, worked with them for a long time, and their continued growth will be an asset and a stabilizing factor for us to continue forward in Burke County.
All right, thank you, Alan. Any questions for Alan on this item?
No, we welcome the 30 new jobs.
All right, seeing here none, this item will remain on the public hearing agenda. Thank you, Alan. Item number 2 comes from Community Development. This will be resolution to withdraw Apparatus and STBGDA grants in public hearing. This comes from Shane Prisby, our interim planning director. Afternoon, Shane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. The Community Development Department is proposing the dissolution of the Fonte Flora Trail, North Powerhouse Road, and Cobb Avenue project and withdrawal from both the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund and Surface Transportation Block Grant direct attributable grants associated with the project. The North Powerhouse Road, Cobb Avenue side project for the Fonte Flora Trail is to construct a multi-use side path along the roadside to connect the Fonte Flora Trail and the southeast side of Lake James. Burke County sought and was awarded a $300,000 PARTIF grant for the right-of-way acquisition along the corridor. The county then sought and was awarded a $570,000 STBGDA grant from the Western Piedmont Council of Governments for preliminary engineering and right-of-way. The county applied for the STBGDA grant using the PARTIF grant as a local match. The intent was that the grants would match each other and no county funding would be used. The STBGDA grant is funded through the Federal Highway Administration and dictates the design parameters, as well as the process and order in which the project can proceed. The STBGDA grant requires that the trail be built as a paved 10-foot wide multi-use path. This is significantly larger than the 5-foot wide natural surface sections of the rest of the Fonte Flora Trail at Lake James. The current construction estimate for the 10-foot wide side project is around $3.5 million, not including the engineering or right-of-way acquisition costs. In addition to the cost, there would be a significant impact to the residents of the area given the amount of right-of-way needed to build a trail of this size and scope. STBGDA projects are slow-moving and generally have long timelines they operate under. The PARTIF grant, however, has a 3-year timeline. Community development realized that it would not be allowed to progress into the right-of-way phase for the STBGDA grant in time to complete the PARTIF grant and subsequently sought and was granted a 1-year extension in January of 2020. By October of 2020, it became clear that the two grants were not going to be able to match each other with their different timetables and funding mechanisms. In order to meet the PARTIF deadline, the projects would need to be run separately. Community development sought and was granted a scope change for the project throughout the trail down St. Paul's Church Road, capitalizing on existing NCDOT right-of-way. This reduced the number of parcels needed to complete the PARTIF grant. The department made progress on the right-of-way acquisition, but was not able to get verbal commitments for all of the right-of-way needed. During this time, instability in the housing market, NCDOT's financial issues, and the pandemic contributed to delays in the project, as well as a difficulty in hiring appraisers or surveyors. Ultimately, it was no longer possible for the department to complete the Partiff grant. Community Development Department is proposing a withdrawal from both the Partiff and STBGDA grants. The county has the ability to withdraw from the Partiff grant with no financial penalty because no Partiff funds were expended. In order to withdraw from the STBGDA project, the county would be required to absorb the entirety of the $262,055 spent to date on engineering. Withdrawing from both grants would allow the county time to make a new trail plan, conduct landowner outreach, and apply for future grants that are better suited to the project. A public hearing is required to withdraw from the Partiff grant. And one note, I reached out to our engineering firm, Kimley Horn and Associates, to just make sure that there were no outstanding balances or any other fees associated with potentially ending the contract. They went through their records and they found an additional billing of about $120. I've spoken to both the clerk and the finance director about this, so that number would have to be revised for a budgetary effect totaling $262,875.
All right, thanks, Shane. Gentlemen, any questions on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I have several, and Shane, I understand that in this arrangement, when we began this process for this trail, that we were informed and told by both grants that they could work together, and later found out it wouldn't work together. They would not allow one grant to qualify, I guess, for the other one to work also. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as I understand it, we went into this event with the idea that the grants would support each other and we wouldn't have to ante up any of our own money. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So I also understand that the cost of the 5-foot trail versus a 10-foot trail would be a whole lot less money. And just, I guess my question there is, if we reduced our plans to a 5-foot trail, would it make a difference? And how much of a difference?
From a cost perspective, substantially. A 5-foot wide natural surface trail runs somewhere around, on average around $5 a foot is the budget number we normally use. But for STBGDA type projects, that number is more like $1 million a mile. It's just the type of trail that they're having you build and the scope and the scale to build that. The problem is, and I looked into this extensively with NCDOT, looking at could you use other federal highway approved standards, which are the trail standards we operate under grants like Recreation Trails Program. At the end of the day, the answer is no. Because we started down the path with the STBGDA money, the requirements are going to be we build it to AASHTO standards, we build it to full ADA standards, not outdoor recreation accessibility guidelines. So essentially, it's the funding source that dictates that the trail will be this wide, it will be built to these standards, and there isn't a way to build a 5-foot trail in this funding stream.
What happens to all the property that's been either donated or we have purchased? If we call off the project, all that is nil and none, right?
There is none to date that would be affected by us walking away from this project. The Partiff grant is a land match grant, and the land that we're proposing to match, we already hold those easements. They have been recorded. Those aren't changing. We haven't purchased any right-of-way through the Partiff grant. We haven't expended any Partiff funds to date. And we're still in the PE phase of the STBGDA grant, which won't allow us to even get to right-of-way acquisition until we complete that and get a categorical exclusion for the NEPA process. So it won't be affected at all on that end for right-of-way.
But do we have any obligations, verbal or otherwise, that we have made an agreement to give X amount of dollars for property for this trail?
We've had verbal discussions about purchasing land from folks along the corridor through the Apparatus grant, but it was made clear through the conversations that I had with landowners that there was a part of process that would have to be followed. I don't believe we've ever made any formal offers or anything. We just had discussions about, are you interested in selling your land? But I've been trying to be real clear with landowners that I spoke with that, you know, it's dictated, the amount that we're able to pay is dictated by the part of grant. So trying to give that information up front, which is one of the reasons why it was hard to get all of the agreements. When you're talking about a very small piece of right-of-way on a property, the number could be a couple $100s, which isn't a very attractive offer for folks.
And so if we cancel, and that's what I'm understanding you are recommending here, is that we stop everything on that trail for the time being, correct?
That is correct.
So we have to go back and start from page 1 or 0 if we come back with a 5-foot trail versus a 10-foot. Is that correct?
More or less, yes. There are some things that we may be able to reuse from the work product that Kimley Horn had done. We have a pretty detailed topographical survey of the corridor. There's existing NCDOT right-of-way on 2 of the 3 roads that the project, that we're proposing to change it to. So in theory, we could build up into those points, but there's a section of North Powerhouse Road that there is currently no NCDOT right-of-way recorded, so they have maintenance limits. That's the roadblock that we have right now.
So if we go back and do this trail at a later date, we're going to pay some engineering group to do what this engineering group has already done. Is that correct?
Optimistically, if we chose to go down that route for that scale and scope of the project, hopefully we'd be able to reuse some of the work product that was already done, piggyback off the existing surveys. For a 5-foot wide trail, we wouldn't need that level of engineering to construct it. It's a much simpler process. A lot of that, I would do the layout. They tend to be more design build contracts with the engineers. They're not engineered. They don't have to go through that kind of process. It's not dictated by the grant source we tend to use for those projects. Mostly it would be a conversation with NCDOT working within their encroachment agreements versus having to have a full surveyed plan, a NEPA review, a right-of-way certification, all of the steps that are required under the STBGDA project.
Here's a big question. It might be one to JR instead of you. Do we have the opportunity to negotiate a lower payment for this if we requested? If we designed a letter, and by the way, that letter shouldn't come from the attorney, it should come from county manager and the board of commissioners, to write a letter of explanation of why we having to stop. It's because the rules changed in the middle of the creek, and would they entertain a lower fee for that service?
At this point, the money that we're talking about has already been spent for services rendered. So that's already gone out the door, and we've already given it to them for what they've done and work that they've produced. With the exception of the $820 that has not yet been billed, which I don't think is unreasonable. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a financial penalty for breaking the contract. I discussed that with them, and they said that, you know, that if that's the case and that's the decision that you all choose to move forward with, there wouldn't be an additional cost to it, just anything that hadn't been billed yet. And that amount that hadn't been billed yet for work that they've rendered was $820.
Well, I understand that we'd be at the mercy of their feet, so to speak. But I think all of us aware that when it's government money, they add more money than they should, they make more profit than they should. You can't tell them that, But my point is, if they just take off the profit side of it, it might be a considerable amount of money that we could reduce this bill. I just hate the taxpayers are gonna pay, what is it, 260, 80,000 time you add the other?
One thing to consider with this is the way the STVGA process works. For engineering particularly, there's what's called a federally audited overhead rate. And that is a number that the firms go through a process with. It's approved by Federal Highway Administration. All the rates are approved by NCDOT. So basically everything that is paid is determined in advance. Down to, there's a massive spreadsheet that NCDOT requires that is filled out with anything that you might possibly do, and it has an hourly billable rate for it. So you take that billable rate for every engineer, every surveyor, for the engineering time, that number gets multiplied by their overhead rate, which is anywhere, I think they're around 195% right now. So you take that number and you multiply it by 2.95, and then you multiply that number by 1.1, and that is what you pay at the end of the day going through this funding source. The reason why people take on this kind of funding, because if you're building a 12-foot wide greenway in an urban area, it's the only grant source that's going to give you the amount of money that you can use to do that. And then you're only responsible for 20% of it. You pay substantially more than you would have if you negotiated with them directly, but at the end of the day, it's only 20%. It's the federal highway process. Whereas one of the reasons why we came back to you all and requested to step back from our other STVGDA grant before we spent any funds was that we were able to get an engineering firm to complete the entire project for the $100,000, which would have just been our match, versus the $500,000 it would have required essentially for us to go through the STVGDA process, which would have been over-designed, which would have gone through that whole end of that. So not being in here is really the savings down the road. The money that we've spent is the money that Federal Highway and NCDOT says, this is what you spend, this is how you spent it. And they have to approve all of those expenditures or we don't get reimbursed. But that $262,055 that's spent today is already out the door. And there isn't really any way to change that. That's just how it goes through the federal process. But we've expended it.
One final question. Do they bill us by hours worked, by project work, or a percentage of project completed? Do you actually get a sheet showing the actual hours an employee's worked?
Correct. Yeah. They have billable rates for everybody involved, and then, percentage of items complete. The project scope lines out each one of the items, the dollar value assigned to it based off of the work that they put into it, and then we're billed off of that for completion. To say, I mean, essentially the project is running entirely the way that it's supposed to. We've met all our benchmarks. The engineering firm has done everything that they're supposed to do and done it well, and has been a good firm to work with. It really isn't anything to do with them or their work product or that. It's really the grant structure that we're stuck under. It's that, the 5-foot wide trail would cost $5 a foot to build, but we can't build it. They won't let us build it if we're using this funding source. Now that we're down the road, this is what we have to do. This is how we have to pay them. So it's really not the engineering firm. They've done everything we've asked for. The county has done the project correctly. It's still technically going fine. Everything is working the way it's supposed to, but this is the federal process that we're in, and there's only one direction to move in that. There is no flexibility.
According to your information, is that we entered this project with rules that apply, and somewhere during the process, those rules got changed, or those participation matches got changed. Whatever changed it, that we could no longer use the two projects together to offset the cost from the other. So I understand what you're doing. I guess that's a question for JR that he didn't know he was gonna get today, but, it would be nice to know if, I probably is not kosher, but you never know unless you ask. If you don't ask the young lady and a pretty girl if you can have a date with her, you'll never know. So, and the same applies here. It may be a kneel exercise, I don't know, but it's at least interesting enough to think about. Thank you.
Other questions for Shane on this matter?
So Shane, just for clarity, there's just no way to foresee this problem when we first took those out, just to summarize.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
There was just no way at the time when we agreed to this that we would foresee this problem, because we've not had a snafu in all the years we've been working on the trail. And so, we're talking about that engineering firm, we've been quite pleased with them. So just for clarity's sake, if somebody asked me, was there a way to foresee this? There really wasn't, is what you're saying.
I think when we applied for the grant, there was a lot more optimism about the flexibility we received with NCDOT and that the funding source would work out. I think a lot of NCDOT's financial crisis has really echoed through this entire project, holding it up. The timelines are the biggest issue that we've run into
Sure.
with. There's just, we're still not in the right-of-way phase, and the Part F grant expires at the end of this month. That's to the point where feasibly it would be another year before we're even in right-of-way acquisition for NCDOT. So I think there was a path to success, but it got very narrow very quickly with the issues with NCDOT. I think there were problems with, you have an 80-20 grant that bills monthly matching a 50-50 grant that bills quarterly. It was always going to be tough to make that work with that, but it's federal money versus state money, so they can match each other because they're local match. But
And when we have a problem like this, does this jeopardize us getting any future grants in any form or fashion?
With STBGDA, it's a pretty simple process to get the grants. I would caution us before going into them to make sure that we're very clear about what the intent of the project is and that it is the exact right project for that source. Part F grant, this is what, speaking with our Part F grant representative, this is what we hope to be the most graceful exit that we can have. One of the concerns was if we went and tried to push for a second extension, that would not look good. I think that bowing out is going to be our best shot, taking some cool time before we apply again.
Because I'm sure if we didn't pay them in full, that would not look good for future grant writing abilities. And the last thing, as far as where we are, you mentioned hitting all the points of completion. And this would be a total guesstimate, but do you have any recognition of how long this would delay the completion of that section?
I don't have a timeline. I think that what we need to do is take a step back. This is our bread and butter grant is Recreation Trails Program. It works really well for trails, which is really what we've built. So that's where you've seen that success that we've had in that. We have several of those grants currently. With the way the grant works, we can apply for that. This won't stop construction for the trail as a whole. We have a lot of work to do on that end of the lake. And by slowing it down a little bit, not having this project running, we can take the time, make those landowner connections, work through the issues, look at alternative routes, and start from there. And maybe it takes longer. Maybe we can build some sections through the RTP and get it closer. I think that with the scale and the scope of what we're talking about, it can be pretty scary for folks. We're talking about what is essentially the width of a one-lane road in your front lawn. I can understand why people are hesitant to jump on board with that. I think if we have other sections in different areas that we can show people that says, look, this is really what we're talking about. This is the 5-foot wide path. It's, you know, it's like a glorified sidewalk in that sense. It's really small impact. It's something that you'll be able to use every day. There becomes a benefit, and there's a lot less of the impact that we would need from not just the physical right-of-way, but the maintenance right-of-way we would have needed and all the cut fill slopes that we would have had to do to make that happen. I mean, there are some properties that would be very impacted by this. And going back to our smaller section, I think we work with that. I think we get that excitement for the trail and let them see the other sections. And I'm hoping that them seeing that this is the last leg to be completed and that it connects into their property, that becomes the thing that allows us to move forward with it.
Thank you.
The STBGDA grant, how far were we down in the well when we found out there was a requirement of a 10-foot? Did we know that up front? Were you going to try to negotiate that, or was that one of those things that just crept up on us? I'm a little concerned we didn't know that up front of the grant process, that it had to be 10-foot paved versus what we wanted at 5-foot.
And the application did predate my time with the county, so I
Okay.
don't know about the discussions that happened prior to that.
Okay.
I know that we worked with them pretty early on trying to get to 8-foot, which would be the minimum standard that AASHTO allows for, and would be a substantially decreased impact. But you have to be able to show why you do that, and we had to get to the 15% plan to be able to make the justification for why we could get down to 8-foot. If you don't have a demonstrable impact that we could say, hey, we want to reduce this, because just saying cost isn't a factor that they'll consider. We can say, look, we're going to be this far into somebody's, you know, lawn with our cut fill marks. If we went down to this, you know, we have a lot less impact, less utility impact. That becomes the argument that we can make to NCDOT, who ultimately has to say yes or no.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I did think of one more. Shane, if we don't ever go back and build this, even at 5-foot, whatever, does that put a stop on the trail? Do you have a stop? And I think this was just a loop around the lake, and you'll still have the trail on the other side. Is that correct?
Yes, potentially we could build up to down Cobb Avenue and up St. Paul's Church Road, and there would be a section on North Powerhouse that would be maybe half a mile that would not be connected. But we have lots of work to do on the western end of the lake, connecting into McDowell County and bringing the trail into Morganton. So there is a lot of work that we can do. We still have around $500,000 worth of Duke Energy funding for the OVT match. I've worked with Margaret to budget that out and block out the biggest chunk of that money for specifically grant matches, because we can take that and mimic the success that we've had on this side of the lake with that first funding, the most successful aspects of it, by taking $25,000 or $50,000 at a time, using that for the Rec Trails Program grants, which are best suited right now for what we're doing, and leverage that and stretch that out over a number of years of construction. Every year, new sections, so long as right-of-way works and those connections contain. So we're not stopping. Even if we walk away from this project, I've got 2 active grants right now that need some scope changes to adjust with some changes that we're working on with some other engineering projects that we have for particularly Canal Bridge, but we could be building again shortly, and that's the intent. Planning our project for next year and working ahead and doing that out into the future as long as we can with that Duke Energy money, and that's our plan right now for success.
Well, I appreciate your answers, and I had a lot of questions, but it's just kind of hard to swallow. Taxpayers paying $260-some thousand and end up with a fat zero, nothing. So,
Not happy to be in this position.
yeah, so that's the reason. Thank you.
And our concern is that if we continue down this road, the cost could be over $1 million for something that we don't necessarily want. or isn't the right fit for our community in that area. And that's,
Yes, I understood if we proceeded, would be in the same situation with a lot more money involved. The taxpayers still would not end up with anything, so. Thank you very much.
Commissioner.
Other questions? Hearing none, this item will remain on the public hearing agenda. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
All right, this brings us to item number 5, consent agenda. First item comes from Madam Clerk, appointment to RAAC and COA. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a request to appoint Paige Pitts to the Regional Aging Advisory Committee, seat number 2, to complete the remainder of a 2-year term ending June 30th, 2023, and to appoint her to the Council on Aging, seat number 6, for the remainder of a 3-year term ending November 30th, 2022. In addition, we'd like to appoint Kimberly Wilson to the Council on Aging, seat number 10, to complete the remainder of a 3-year term ending November 30th, 2023.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any questions on this item? Seeing and hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item 2, clerk appointment removal to the Burke County Planning Board. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. William Tunstill occupies seat number 1, representing the East on the Burke County Planning Board, and he recently resigned his seat, so we're requesting his removal. We are also seeking applications to fill that vacancy. Richard Evie occupies seat number 6 on the Planning Board. His term ended September 30th, and he is willing to serve another 3-year term. Mr. Evie has served on the Planning Board since December 2014, occupying the former alternating seat that switched from east to west every 3-year term, and his current position in seat number 6. Staff reports that Mr. Evie is a good member, and his reappointment is requested along with an exception to the 2-term limit set forth in section 8.25 of the zoning ordinance. Or if you do not wish to reappoint Mr. Evie and make that exception, then we would request that you remove him from the roster and thank him for his service.
All right, gentlemen, any questions on this matter? This being on consent, do we need to arrive at our consent today, Madam Clerk?
Or shortly thereafter.
Are we good, gentlemen, are we good with the reappointment of Mr. Evie with the exception to section 825?
Mr. Chairman, let me ask one question before we get there. Dorian Palmer still listed for the West. Is he still representing West? If we pull Richard out of the West?
We did, didn't he? He's down in Colony Springs, right? Yes. Mm-hmm.
He's
Sorry.
still representing the West.
On this paper, yes, but not really.
Only on paper, okay.
Yeah, we fixed that, so let me just make that correction, so I'll get that updated. But yes, we did move him to the east.
Okay, so Richard would be coming out of the West then.
I think if I remember correctly, we switched him and Joyce Coonahan because she was an at-large.
Okay,
And I thought I had updated that roster, so I do apologize.
it's no problem.
Assuming everybody is in the right place, are we good with the exception on the term limit? I guess maybe is the better question. Everybody okay with that?
Madam Clerk, quick clarification, if you will, please. I allowed my mind to read a note here, and I missed a statement that you made. Did you say that he had gone past his term limits to serve?
Yes, he's served in a couple different seats over the years. But if you start adding from 2014 to 2021, he has served 7 years.
And what is the limit for that position?
It says 2 terms, 6 years.
6 years. Do we have anybody else who has applied?
I do not have any other applications at this time, but we did run an ad in this weekend's paper.
Okay, hearing that, unless we receive other applications, are we good with extending his term limits? Yes, okay. All right, let's go forward then under those pretense, if things change, then we'll address that in our regular meeting, okay?
Yes, and certainly if you get additional applications, I'll move it to the decision agenda.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, item 3, also coming from the clerk, reappointment and removal from the Burke County Board of Adjustment. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick McClure's term on the Burke County Board of Adjustment for seat number 2 East ends September 30th. He is not seeking reappointment, and therefore his removal is requested, and we are seeking applications for his replacement. Mario Chiasetti occupies seat number 7, the alternate at large, and his term ended on September 30th. He is seeking reappointment, and planning staff reports that Mr. Chiasetti is a good member and recommends that he be reappointed.
All right, any questions on this matter? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 4, also from the clerk, resolution updating plat review officers. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. This is a resolution updating the list of plat review officers for the towns as well as the county to do some housekeeping.
All right, any questions on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Item number 5 comes from the county manager, funding for animal shelter conceptual design and update needs assessment. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, as you're aware, we've been moving down the road here to look at the potential of building a new shelter. We have come to a conclusion about a location being there on Kirksey Drive near the current 911 facility. So now I feel the next appropriate step for us to take would be to have the conceptual design work and update our needs assessment so that we could do the appropriate planning if we do decide to move forward to even get further down that trail with the actual architectural design work. But I believe we have our consultant available and he can go into a little more about what's going on and answer your questions.
All right, thank you, Brian. Afternoon, Mr. Bernard.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hear you? Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me. Is there a specific question?
Any questions for Mr. Bernard on this matter? I believe we're okay at this point. Brian, anything else to add?
No, sir. Again, I think it's the next appropriate step, and if we can line this up, we may even be in a position in the spring as we're developing budget for even going further down the road if the board is so inclined.
All right. I think we're all good here for now, Mr. Bernard. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right. Without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Item number 6 comes from Finance, application for public school building capital lottery funds. Margaret? Come on down.
A portion of the lottery proceeds are deposited in a special fund administered by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction called the Public School Building Capital Fund. This fund is used by counties to address the school capital needs. So our lottery funds build up and then we pull them down and they're utilized for part of their debt service. Every other year is typically what we do, but it's just as we see a need. Currently, the balance in the lottery funds as of the end of July was $2,066,358. So we'd like to go ahead and actually, the application is actually for $2,065,000. There's a mistake in the motion. So this was approved by the Board of Education at their September 20th meeting, and we would request the board approve this being forwarded to the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction for approval.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Any questions on this item?
This is their first withdrawal for this year, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We typically just do one a year.
Do you recall the last 3 or 4 years how much they've withdrawn from the lottery fund?
In fiscal year 1920, we did $2 million to use toward debt service. In 16-17, we did $1,695,000. In 15-16, we did $1,069,625.
I bring this up every year, Margaret, but I can't seem to get any satisfaction and answers to it. We had went to court and agreed upon we avoided court and had an agreement, and the way that shook out that the county was because we allowed them to continue to have the funds on a previous formula, that any funds they got from the lottery funds, that the county would get a percentage of it. Brian, do you remember how much that was? At 20%?
No, I don't recall that right off the bat. I'm sorry.
JR? You
Do not recall.
You can get that probably from Paul, or have you seen that agreement, JR? Have you ever read that agreement?
I'm sure I have if we signed it during my tenure, but I don't, I'd have to.
Can we
review
have
it.
that researched by our regular meeting, please?
If I recall correctly, and I will research it, the percentage only kicks in if we change the funding method. At this point, it's that the funds are utilized and they're not going to the school system themselves, they're going against the debt we hold for Mountain View School or the other schools that we have. Actually, it's for the bonds for the high schools, not Mountain View. So it doesn't go to the school system's hands, it stays with us to be applied toward the annual debt payments.
We didn't have that exception on that agreement.
I will pull that out.
Okay.
Are we talking about if they go over a certain amount of sales tax, that there could be a change in how there's some funds distributed between the county and the schools board? Is that what you're referencing?
Well, Buddy Armour ought to be real familiar with that. He was chairman of the school board. I was chairman of the county commissioners. And the two boards met and we ironed those terms out. Paul Limes probably remembers it well, if you want to have discussion with him.
I will definitely research the agreement again and verify that if there's a percentage that we're supposed to keep of this. Is that what you're thinking? Is that what you believe the agreement was, that we keep a portion of this
Yes,
and
ma'am.
not use it toward their debt service?
Yes.
We're not allowed to pull it down by state, by the DPI rules. We can't do that.
Well, I don't,
We have to use it for debt service. It's our debt.
I don't know how our two attorneys approved that if it was not legal to do. So that's even a bigger question, isn't it?
We
'Cause
can't
that's
use
what
it
you're ending-
generally.
Huh?
We can't use it generally. We have to use it for debt service. That's the allowable method for
Well,
pulling
that's
it
the reason
down.
we need to revisit the contract on how it was done, but
Okay.
the two boards and the two attorneys from representing both of us agreed on those terms, so.
All right, other questions on this matter? All right, hearing none, without objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Margaret. Item number 7 comes from the Fire Marshal, request for approval of a written agreement between Home Trust Bank and Longtown Volunteer Fire Department. Mike Willis will bring that to us this afternoon and/or May. Afternoon, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Longtown Fire Department is entering into an agreement with Home Trust Bank for the lease purchase of a new fire apparatus. Their board of directors have met and feel that they are physically and financially able to go ahead with this purchase, and respectfully request that the chairman sign the letter that Home Trust Bank is presented on behalf of the commissioners for them to pursue that loan.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions on this item? I think Nate's here. Mike, any questions?
What is the apparatus y'all are going to buy? I thought it was on here, but I don't see it.
Thank you, Board. The apparatus is a new fire truck, new pumper.
A new fire truck?
Yes, sir.
Are we allowed to have the price of that new fire truck?
Excuse me, sir?
What is the price of the new?
It's $350,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Nate. Thank you, Mike. Seeing here and none, this item will remain on consent agenda. Item number 8 comes from General Services, site plan for the Highway 70 Convenience Center. This comes from Mark Delahunt, General Services.
Yes, good
Mark.
afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. As you are aware, the county recently finalized the purchase of some property in Eastern Burke. One of the intended uses of that property is to construct a replacement convenience site for the one located on Rodis Road. I'm here before you this afternoon to request funds for that design on that replacement site, which we have estimated at $35,000. This would include design and permitting, everything we would need to go out for bid. An additional intended use of that property is a facility for the water sewer department. Due to the size of our current space, much of the heavy equipment is stored outside, leaving it exposed to the elements, vandalism, and theft. I would like to also request an additional $25,000 for planning and design work on that potential use as well. The hope is that this will provide us with some solid cost of construction estimates that can be used in the next budget.
Gentlemen, you've heard this information. Any questions for Mark on this item? And I presume, Madam Clerk, you'll put those numbers in our information.
You have a copy at your seats.
Excuse me?
Okay, I see it, yeah. All right, gentlemen, you have those revised numbers as Mark stated them. They're a staple to your today's agenda. Any questions for Mark on these items? All right, seeing here none. Thank you, Mark.
Okay, thank you.
Will remain on consent agenda. Item 9 comes from the Tax Department. Late applications for 2021 age exclusion and veterans exclusion. This will be presented by Danny Eisenhower, our tax administrator. Afternoon, Danny.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. I'd like to give you a little background on what we're talking about here. First, the Tax Department has received late applications for the age exclusion and the veterans exemption. Persons qualifying for the age exclusion receive a reduction in the value of $25,000 or 50% of the home and the prime site value, whichever is greater. To qualify, the home must be their primary residence. The primary owner must be at least 65 years old or totally and permanently disabled, and the owner of the household, the owner or household income cannot exceed $31,500 for the previous year. The disabled veterans exclusion reduces the tax value by $45,000. To qualify, the home must be their primary residence. One must be a disabled veteran with honorable discharge or the surviving spouse of a disabled veteran. The disability must be service-related and considered 100% disabled or receive housing benefits under Code 38 U.S.C. 2101. Partial disabilities do not qualify. They must submit a certification of disabled veterans property tax exclusion along with the application for the property tax relief. The form NCDAV 9 must be completed by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. The application period for these exemptions is January 2nd through June 1st each year. Due to the applications being late, the assessor's only option was to not deny these applications for the current year. These applicants now have the right to either reapply next year or appeal the assessor's decision to the Board of Commissioners. And that's stated on the last paragraph of the application. So I've got several appeals here. The first one is a veteran's exclusion. It's parcel 43928. Terry A. and Susan King are appealing the tax assessor's decision to the Board of Commissioners.
If I could interrupt you just a
Yes.
second. Gentlemen, we've got all the details. Do we want Danny to go through each one of these separately with details, or any questions? Or
I don't think so.
Danny, are you required to go through any of those?
Whatever you would like.
Okay, gentlemen, I read through all these, and I hope you have. If there's any questions, certainly want to entertain them. Any question on any of these?
If we agree with this, Mr. Chairman, what is, which appeal are we looking at?
Well, there are 4 appeals. The total effect, there are 5 appeals. The total budgetary effect.
I did not put a total on there. It's individual.
36. Yeah, around $1,700. If you look on page 57, you'll see those listed individually.
I will say, had these been timely, they would all have been accepted, and we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. Any concerns with that from anybody?
Seemed like a reasonable request to me.
All right, hearing no objection, this item will remain on the consent agenda. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you.
Brings us to item number 10, Tax Department Tax Collection Report for September 2021. Danny?
Okay, gentlemen, this is from July 1 of 21 through September 30th of 21. Property tax, we have collected 70.21%. Motor vehicle tax, 28.15%, for a total of 65.85% collected there. Delinquent taxes are 41.41% collected. Late list penalties, 30.27%. And then if we look at property tax for real and personal property, not including motor vehicles, we're at 68.27%.
And gentlemen, you also have these reports attached to your agenda at your place there. Any question on the tax collection report for Danny?
Mr. Chairman, how are we comparing to previous years, Danny? We're about holding our own?
I'd say we're pretty even off the top of my head. I will be glad to send some information through the county manager, give you stats on that.
Okay.
Other questions? Hearing none, this item will remain on the consent agenda without objection. Item number 11, also from Tax Department, release refund report for September 2021. Danny?
Here we have the release report shows $34,189.18. We had $34,113.39 rebilled, which gives us a net release of $75.79. Refunds in the amount of $124.35. In the vehicle tax, we had refunds in the amount of $211.64.
All right, any questions for Danny on this item? Seeing here none, this item will remain on the consent agenda without objection. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Item number 6 on our agenda is items for decision. We have one item that comes to us this afternoon from Finance. This is a discussion and approval of American Relief. Sure that P has a good name, but I can't think of it right now. Program, maybe? Is that it, Margaret? American Relief Program? Or
Plan.
Plan. It's a
American
real,
Relief Plan.
it's a real plan, okay.
You threw me off trying to figure out what it was. I'm like, plan. Yeah. ARP. Not to be confused with AARP.
No.
Although it's going to drive us there.
All right. Gentlemen, this item was moved from our meeting last month to give us more time and to see more detail as staff has brought some more detail here to us on these items. So, Margaret, I'm just going to let you take off with it, okay?
We have it broken into 3 sections, and we have staff here to assist with any specific questions you might have. Under the first section, these are items brought to us from the Emergency Medical Services Department that will assist them in having a better quality of machines, certain machines that we haven't had on our trucks before because the funding just hasn't been available through the county. These are fully eligible through the American Relief Plan funds, and we would entertain any questions you have on the first section of EMS ARP expenditures. We can tell you what they are, why they feel they're important, whatever you'd like on those.
All right, thank you, Margaret. Gentlemen, let's look at this first section. Under the green column there, these are all EMS items that staff believes do meet the current rules that we have. Are there any questions about any of these items?
Mr. Chairman, I really don't want to belabor this, but Margaret, you're saying these are things that we would like to have now that we've not had before, right?
Yes.
If we can get our EMS director up there, I want to know what these actually are going to mean to EMS. What's the advantages of it? How's it going to make things better for us on these trucks? And have we asked for these things before?
We'll start off with the ventilators, those old ventilators. What this is, if when we take over an airway of a patient, we have to breathe for them, of course. The way we do it now on emergency call is with a bag that we squeeze. These machines allow you to have a specific stated rate, to the patient, more stable. A lot of times we get in the back, there's human error that goes into it. It also has filters on it, which acts as a fake nose. So in the long term, I can go into detail about it as long as you can, but it'll decrease the amount of pneumonias and the subsequent deaths in the hospital to our patients versus what we do now. What we do now is good, but they have longer hospital stays. This will shorten that.
All right, let me stop you right there. If we do the ventilators, what's the shelf life on those?
Usually about 5 to 7 years on the ventilators.
Okay, so 5 to 7 years we'll be coming back asking for ventilators again.
The current ventilators we have now have lasted going on 8 years. And we can go out, but we will need to replace, and my plan is to replace 1 or 2 a year, starting pretty soon, so you don't have that large amount of money coming in, request. Okay, the bigger tickets, the IV pumps. We're in the back of the truck. We have somebody that we need to give a medication to, a drip rate, a certain drip rate. Now we have to count the drops that comes out of the drip chamber and do calculations. With IV pumps, we can hit a button and say, we need to give this patient dopamine, start, this is their weight, start, and it figures all that out for you. It's more precise, better outcomes. Those old auto pulse, those are CPR devices that are actually made of a board, and it has a belt that wraps around and does automated CPR. which collapses the chest. 40% more blood flow to the heart and brain versus regular CPR. 40 to 50% more likely to regain a pulse when you get in the hospital with those. ISTAT specimen machines, that's where we can, when we're out in the field, the new thing now with the Medicare and the Medicaid is delivering that patient to the appropriate facility. It's not necessarily your local hospital. We go to Fry with certain heart attacks. These machines will allow us to actually draw blood, put it in the machine, and it'll print out lab values. We can take those lab values and determine if they're in sepsis, if they're having these problems, and direct them to the correct hospital. Another exciting one for me, since my son plays football, is they're just have released a cartridge for concussions. So if you respond, there's an enzyme your body puts off if you have a concussion. You can put a few drops of blood on it, and it's positive or negative for concussion. And if you let that, we do standbys at football games, we're put in a difficult situation, because if you let a player go back in that you're not sure of, they have second impact syndrome that they can die within 30 seconds of the hit. Super rare.
What's a new ambulance cost right now?
$225,000 to $250,000.
And that's without anything in it, correct?
That's without any of the stuff in it, yes.
How many ambulances do we currently put on the road?
We have 10 during the day, we have 1 QRV, we have 2 admin. So 10 square box ambulances during the day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I think a couple of things that we were trying to achieve with part of this listing and pre-knowing what we were going to get and all this kind of good stuff. And I think part of the, Johnny kind of asked half the question. I'll finish the question if I may. If we purchase that list of equipment or items, how long before we receive shipment? And the second part to the question is, what procedure are we hoping to employ or practice that? Because all these manufacturer companies know that we got lots of money that's been given to us. And what are we going to do to prohibit them from gouging us with higher prices and making us pay more than what we normally would buy that product for? And I think those two questions to me become the head of the request for whatever. So,
right, I'll answer the second part first. Luckily, with the Zoll ventilators, the IV pumps, the Zoll auto pulse, the big ticket items, they are on the state purchasing, and they have been negotiated, the prices, so the prices are pretty much been stabilized over years, so there's no gouging there. What our goal is to provide the best care we can, and that sounds like a blanket term, but if somebody goes in cardiac arrest right here, we want them to have the same opportunity to survive as surrounding counties. So, and we do a great job, don't get me wrong, our paramedics are some of the best in the state. But if we can get that pulse back quick, if we can put them on a ventilator to give those measured breaths, if we can run our medications with IV pumps, and we can get them to the hospital or Fry, get them stable enough to go, Mission, wherever, and they get a better outcome. It's all about improving cardiac survival rates. Across the country, it's about 15%, 14 to 15% cardiac survival rate. The numbers that we run, we're at about we're almost 20%, depending on the month. But with some of these strategies, other EMS systems have went up to 40%. And, you know, we're having younger people going to cardiac arrest, and that's what my hope is. As far as procedures, in the future, this is not something that we'd like. I mean, this is more or less getting our equipment with the standard of care around us for about 2 years ago. Other than the specimen, the blood machines, those are pretty cutting edge. But we're getting sort of caught up with this. This is allowing us to catch up and get where we need to be. Hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I think it does, and I appreciate it. I think it's important, if that's the word, or almost mandatory that, you know, if we get started on this and by the time you get all of them in, and that's the reason I asked the question about purchase date and delivery time, you know, these aggressive companies are raising rates and prices on items almost daily, not weekly or monthly. And it's just very difficult.
I agree with you. Time is of the essence. I know Caldwell just bought all new ventilators. You know, several have. So as this money gets available, the lead time does go out further. I talked to the Zoll rep, and they're not like they were at the first of COVID, where it was 6 months. They're at about 3 months now to get everything in, which in this world now is not a bad turnaround time, to be honest with you, versus trucks that are 8 months or 9 months.
I am assuming that you have all kinds of companies and books that you can look up and compare these prices on these items and make the best deal for Burke County.
Right, we do, and we look at, this is not the bells and whistles. The reason we went to those Zoll ventilators is we have the Zoll cardiac monitors, and there's some capability there. You can pull data off. The Zoll auto pulse, you can pull data off and get a printout. So, and we could go Philips or some other company, but then they wouldn't connect to what we currently have. And as far as pricing wise, this is not the higher line. Philips just came out with one that's got a ultrasound and Doppler built in, you know, so you can go, these are what we need. Military specs, the ventilators are about that big, wrapped in steel cage. They've been used on the military overseas for a while. So they're more utilitarian, but still give us a great service.
Mr. Chairman, just a question or two. So looking down this list, of course, I'm not going to know what every bit of this is, but you hit the big tickets. But, you know, is this, so you're saying all this on here is needs-based? It's not a wish list?
No, there's no wish on here. This is what we need to get.
So if we're in a regular budget year, you go to Margaret and say?
No. We put in for 2 ventilators a year. We put in for 2 cardiac.
These are the items you just, instead of asking for them at one time, we're trying to piecemeal them every year. I just want for clarity when people say, well, why did you buy this? Well, it's moving up and taking care of things we're going to put in the budget anyway in the next 5 to 6 years, which, you know, I completely understand. I just want to make sure we're being effective with the monies we have so it affects us in a positive way in the budget moving forward. So,
absolutely. We won't be asking for these coming forward if that's the question. We can only afford to buy 1 or 2 a year. This will allow us to. And with the ventilators, it's hard because we only have 2 now. So if we're wanting to get a cardiac arrest back and we're wanting to create a policy, get approved by our medical director and a state medical director that when we get this person back, we put them on a ventilator and this is the perfect settings for it. I can't write that policy having 2 ventilators, one on each end of the county. So this will allow us to have everybody from west to east treated the same.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do we have the good stretchers in all 10 boxes now?
We do.
Okay.
And that's absolutely wonderful.
Okay, good.
We do.
Other questions on this side? All right, thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Let's move down then to the next section, Margaret.
The next section is HVAC expenditures within the ARP funds, replacing a unit with better filters, types of filters. PETA, I believe is the phrase. It's fully allowable if you are improving your ventilation and your airflow to utilize these funds to replace HVAC units. So none of these are a direct replacement of what we have. It's an improvement on what we have that we would not normally have been able to fund. So we wanted to utilize these funds to get better airflow going and moving in the buildings, because they say that's critical to trying to contain the virus, is making sure the air's moving and moving appropriately, and it has specialized filters on it. And that's what this would address.
Questions on this HVAC items?
Mr. Chairman, just a quick point. I believe that we talked about this, and Brian, these were items that we're going to put, we would put in the general budget anyway, that have to be replaced from, or need to be augmented in some form or fashion. That was going to be our plan. So this is actually monies that would have been pulled out of our budget.
We probably would have done plain replacement, one-to-one, whereas we're going to do slightly upgraded replacements because we can. It will save using county funds for a normal replacement, but also enable us to do something better to make sure that staff and citizens within the buildings are getting a cleaner air, hopefully, and a better filtered air.
Okay, thank you.
So is the filter a different filter, better filter, more advanced filter?
Yes.
We'll be purchasing these in the future then in budget.
It's built into it. I would assume you would have to replace it just like the others. We do that now. From what I've seen, it doesn't appear to be a significantly different cost on those filters. So I don't believe we're putting ourselves into a place of now a $50 filter is going to be $200. We're not understanding that. Circumstances obviously could change, but at this point we don't anticipate the filters being significantly different.
Other questions? All right. Next section is
The
water
next
and sewer.
section is some pump replacements, the replacement and improvement on our SCADA service, which I can't tell you what the acronym is. I can tell you that that's the alarm system that lets us know if we have overflows or backups or pumps down. Right now, our systems are not working the best, and we're hoping with the pump replacements, first and foremost, we'll not have the overflows. But if we do, we want to improve the alarm system to address that as well, and this is an allowable expense, along with this one line that has issues at East Burke High School.
Questions in this area?
Mr. Chairman, which line at East Burke, and what is the problem with that line, and how old is that problem?
I will defer to Mr. Delahunt on that question.
It is actually old clay pipe that's probably was placed in when the school was built, and need to get some plastic pipe in there. As you can understand, over time that truly deteriorates.
Has it cost us any dollars so far?
We did have some repairs there. I mean, it's brittle. We have had some recent repairs even since I've been here there.
Mark, and that approximately 12,000.
I believe that's about what that repair was, yes.
No further questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, on that Music Mountain pump station, we just built that, what, Wayne? 10 years ago or something. Is it wore out or?
It's operating, but the, part of the problem with all these pumps that you see in there is, if it did go down, we'd be hurting bad for quite a while until we get a replacement. They're not sitting on the shelf. This would allow us to be back up and running in a minimal amount of time. I mean, it's not a matter of if, it's probably a matter of when over time, you know.
What is the average life of a pump that's like the one at Music Mountain?
It depends on the volume that it's used or what it's being called upon to do, but I'd guess maybe 12 years on average.
12?
So somewhere in there. That's off the top of my head. I'm not quite sure.
Okay. What size pump is that at 21,000?
With all these pumps, I apologize, but I can't give you that off the top of my head. I apologize.
All right. Okay. That's all I have, sir.
Okay. Any other questions on the water and sewer sections? All right. Margaret?
Our final section is talking about doing some significant pump station work. And on these, we would need to go out and really explore some things with West Consultants on exactly what to do. They had back in 2018 looked at the Indian Hills pump station, and that's where this number comes from, with updates from them on the fact that we're not able to meet capacity there. We have significant issues with the state that we have to address there. We were actually looking to see whether we would need to borrow funds or what we would have to do to address Indian Hills Pump Station before this came up, and Island Creek Pump Station as well. It was a toss-up, but we were going to prioritize Indian Hills first and then have to do Island Creek at these kind of dollar amounts out of county funds, because the water sewer enterprise would not be able to support these without assistance from regular county dollars. So these are eligible expenses throughout through the ARP funds, and we would like to pursue getting some plans drawn and get those looked at to go ahead and replace them.
All right. Thank you, Margaret.
Margaret, are we not eligible for CDBG, at least $2 million in these projects right here?
These would be eligible under the CDBG funds. We can go through the application process with those and determine it's not going to cover all of it. And once we do that, we would not be able to use ARP funds for the difference necessarily. They're still trying to determine, that's one of the questions out there waiting on the final rules, is if you used, right now they're telling us we can't commingle it. So if we say got $2 million for Indian Hills, we would be having to fund the other roughly $1 million with county dollars. We couldn't necessarily use these funds for that difference.
Could CDBG be used for the pump replacements and the SCADAs?
They are typically one project, so you couldn't split them up, but we can explore that. I know Mark was going to be working with the COG on the new CDBG funds that are out there. That's a good, I think, 6 to 8 months out before they're even finishing applications and determining those. So, but we can look at that if you prefer.
Indian Hills would be considered as one project as far as CDBG?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me think a little bit. Go ahead.
Other questions?
Margaret, on each one of these, you have a price and a list, and your grand total is $4,016,030.
Or those last 4 items, yes, sir.
Yes, correct. And my question is that a quote, is that a bid, or is that a suggested price?
That's an estimate in working with West Consultants on other projects they've done similar to these in the recent past. The Indian Hills, they had done some preliminary work for the county several years ago, and they looked at it and gave some updated numbers, but that's why we would have to go out, and these ones would definitely be just estimates under this section, and we're trying to know if you want us to pursue these under these funds.
Is all these pumps will they be bought from the same vendor?
It would vary based on what pumps are there because they're going to have to be compatible to what's in place. You wouldn't have one type here and one type here because normally almost all these pump stations have two side by side.
So you're going to ask us to endorse or vote for $4,016,030, and it could come back at 4.5 million.
No, sir, that's just to direct us to proceed with looking at bidding those out and getting specific numbers for you. On the bottom section, that motion is just asking whether or not we could look toward getting you good dollar amounts on these under the ARP funds. The other sections, the amounts have been quoted and reviewed and should be, at the time we buy them, relatively close, although we built in a small contingency just in case in the motions. The last section is just to direct staff. The motion requests you direct us to proceed with bidding these as ARP sewer projects. But we would come back to you with the actual dollar amounts once that's done for Island Creek Pump Station and Indian Hills Pump Station. These are just very estimated numbers in that 4 million. The other numbers are much more accurate.
So what happens if we vote 4 million in and it comes out more?
That dollar amount's just there to give you an idea of what they would be, Mr. Taylor. We're not asking you to approve the 4 million. We're giving you an idea of what it could be and asking you if you're comfortable with us doing these as ARP projects. And then we would come back, and at that time, you could deny the contracts in the bidding, request us to look at other funding sources, however you prefer.
When I approve this, I am approving a budget figure of 4,016,000 for those projects.
No, sir.
All you're doing is telling her to go ahead and get real bids so we can come back to you with what the actual price would be, and y'all would decide if you want to approve it or not.
There'll be some expense entailed with getting some of these bids on these major projects because we're going to have some drawings. We didn't want to even go that far without knowing whether or not you felt like these were projects we should even think about pursuing. We just wanted direction that if we came back to you with figures that we hope would be in this neighborhood, that would be before we spent any time or any money or had our West consultants do any work on it when there's so many other things. You know, we didn't want to have staff focused on these at all if that was not something you felt like we should be working on.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Margaret, following up on what Johnny asked about CDBG, there's, and going toward one project, you say, okay, it's Indian Hills, it's a $3 million project, possibly we get $2 million, we'd have to come up with $1 million. But it'd still free up $2 million ARP money to be used elsewhere.
Yes, sir.
And so we could be possibly leaving $2 million on the table, in a way. So, following that line of logic, I don't have near enough clarity to direct staff at this point to talk about even thinking about $4 million worth of projects. I'm completely uncomfortable with that because we don't have enough information in front of us. We may not have enough information for 3 or 4 months. And so I don't want to direct resources and staff, send them down the rabbit hole to do that when we're not in any rush. And, the other things, EMS, I understand. Some of the boiler replacement, some of the the different units at the courthouse, Valdez Library, I'm fine with those, the HVACs and EMS. But the other, you're talking about a considerable amount of money where we can actually probably maybe use those resources in other ways down the road. So to me, that's where I stand, Mr. Chair. Fine with the, like I said, HVAC, EMS, pursuing that. The other, those are massive tickets that I just don't feel comfortable with at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to follow up on what Vice Chair was saying. Margaret, as spending this kind of money, I would like for our consultants, as they check into, I know this is a ballpark figure. I really don't care what the figure is right now, but it's a ballpark figure of what it might be. what I want to know is, how long is it going to last? If we go ahead and decide to use the ARP monies, you know, on some of these projects, what kind of guarantees, and I know guarantees are out there, and I know we probably can't get a guarantee, but if we go ahead and do Indian Hills, how long is it going to last us? You know, maybe Mark can give us a good idea, maybe Wes can give us a good idea of how many years down the road. It's just like Commissioner Taylor was asking Wayne a while ago, well, we just did such and such like 10 years ago. I don't know that 10 years is a good dollar figure. You know, with the way things are being built today, maybe they're being built to go down in 10 years. So kind of, do you have any ballpark of what we're looking at if we did Indian Hills? How long would it last us?
Well, if I could start at the top of that line there with the Island Creek Pump Station, the pump change out, those pumps that are in there now, I think they've been there about 10 years, and there's not a replacement for them. They become obsolete.
Obsolete.
And what is being requested there is a change out and a modification to the actual pump station and how they connect so that it's more universal. And if pump goes out now, we'd have to ask someone to do a die cast and all this other stuff of what's in there for it to fit up. We'd be in pretty tough shape. The next one on the Island Creek grinder install, what that is actually a grinder that we actually have one at another station that grinds any hard debris before it gets to the pump. And it helps the pump out and keeps it from potentially breaking down, getting clogged. The next one, the force main replacement, that again is the line that leaves the pump station, and it's force main, and it's like original install. And the top of that pipe is probably like a potato chip thin just over the years, and the sewer gases that have eat away at it, and that's what that money's being requested for. And the Island Creek Pump Station, and I know that is a lot of money, and that's you probably heard that before. The station sits next to a creek, and whenever we get a heavy flood, it puts the whole place underwater and it wreaks havoc on it. Part of that, I think, is the plan to lift the elevation of the pump station and everything there. Maybe. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But on that number, if I recall correctly, there was built into it a 10% contingency, as is done with most projects. So the thought of it exceeding that is, in my opinion, pretty unlikely. And one thing we're trying to do here is get ahead of the curve. As you know, all other municipalities are going to be seeking contractors and projects to utilize the funds they've received, and we're trying to get out ahead of that so that maybe we can get a better price.
How long do you think the pump station will last?
If all these modifications are done, and part of that plan is to have 3 pumps instead of just 2, which will make the load a little milder. I'm going to say 12 to 15 years, but that's a better question for maybe Benji or somebody.
Mr. Chairman, I'm kind of like Scott. I want a little bit more clarity, a little bit more in-depth study. You know, this is a lot of money. I want to make sure we get some good use of this money. And like I said, we've got CDBG money sitting out there too that I hope we go after. We've let some of that slide by and haven't used it before. If I would like for us to consider, if we have to get a part-time grant writer, if we really need to get some of this money back out. We've just let this money slide away, and I'll make sure we get it when we can. I don't want us to get into the shape that some of the municipalities are. They're hurting on infrastructure. We're actually, even though it looks bad, we're actually in pretty good shape on infrastructure, and I would like to keep us that way.
That Indian Hills project, that's something that we really need to address, even if we don't mess with the other ones right away. But that Indian Hills, I mean, that's been going on for 20 years, they're crying out loud. And those people are living down there with that. That's something I think we need to address as soon as we can. Mr. Chairman, Margaret, I did want to tell you thank you. I appreciate the work, and I immediately tell you that the information we have today is 5 times better than it was a month ago, so I appreciate your hard work. But now note to the commissioners, and you know, if these items are going to be approved by the ARP funds, instead of tax dollars being paid to do these projects. It's a win-win for Burke County taxpayers. So we need to keep that in mind and in check that, and I don't know how soon we need to act. I'm with Johnny on the fact that I don't want to sign a blank paycheck, and I definitely don't want to say I want to spend $4 million and I end up spending $5 million. So we've got to balance that somehow to make sure we're at least as close can get. So thanks again for the information. That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Other comment? I guess the only thing I want to say at this point is back to this item, this last item, the $4 million item. I want to be sure we're not losing sight. Margaret, correct me if I'm wrong. You're not asking us to approve these funds. You're just asking for permission to do the work necessary so we know what the dollar amount is.
For those last 4 items, yes, sir.
I think at this point, staff is saying, yeah, they think these are good numbers, but they may not be. And without doing some study, without getting some information, whether we do CDBG or ARP or nothing, we don't know what the number is. And I guess my concern is if we direct staff to do nothing on these items, then we're still sitting on 0 here.
Point being, I want this done and I want it done right. I want whoever follows me sitting in this chair to say they made a mistake 10 years ago when they did this. So I don't care what the dollar is. If it's $4.5 million, $5 million, whatever it takes, we have the money to do it, as Maynard said. Let's get it done right this time. And so I need just a little bit more clarification on what right is. I just want the public to know, I want to know, I want this board to know what right is before we move forward. And 30 days ain't going to hurt us on that, I don't think.
So what are we asking staff to do in the next 30 days?
In the next 30 days, I think we need to get with West and see if they can give us any indication as to what would happen actually at Indian Creek to make it the way it should be. Just like Mark said, we've never said that thing needs to be built up 10 feet, get it away from that creek, or 20 feet or whatever. I don't know. Just tell me what it's going to take to make Indian Hills correct, and I will go ahead and vote for what it takes to make it correct. I just want to know what correct is, if at all possible.
Can you work with that, Margaret?
Yes, sir. We'll ask West. They've got the preliminary information already. We'll have them at the next meeting. Do you want them here at the regular meeting in a couple weeks, or are you talking about November's meeting?
If they can be ready in a couple weeks, it's on the agenda. We can put it that way. If not, we'll put it on the November agenda.
We'll talk with them and get back. We'll also look at CDBG, and we've got multiple classes. We had another Monday morning that Scott and I did on another question and answer and information from School of Government. We do them once a week, sometimes twice a week. So that one, we can certainly talk more about whether can we match it with the CDBG. I know one conversation has said no, if you're mixing ARP with regular county dollars is good, but they're talking about that the feds, similar to the grants you heard earlier, you can't put 2 pockets of federal dollars together typically. They don't usually want you to do that. So we'll just have to see if that's an option too, and then I'll see where Mark's at with the COG and the CDBG when the application deadlines are and everything, if that's something we can pursue to partially fund it or how we want to do that.
I don't even care about partially funding it. If we can just leverage $2 more million somewhere so that we can use $2 million out of ARP somewhere else, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. We can do that. And that's on the bottom section there.
All right, so I think I'm hearing the board say we're okay with the EMS, the HVAC items, and the first set of pump items. So we're to leave those on for decision as they are for our regular meeting, and then we'll hear an alternative for the last section of pump station work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. All right, that brings us to the reports section. I remind you, if you've got reports that need to go in our agenda packet, get those to the clerk. Would ask you to like us on Facebook. Take care of your pets, spay or neuter, secure your trash. Just saw trash blowing out of a truck last night. We all need to remember, when you throw your plastic bottle in the back of your truck, it won't stay there. Keep it in the cab and take it home with you. Adopt a pet from the Animal Services Center. Encourage citizens to be vaccinated against COVID-19. If you have not been vaccinated, please consider being vaccinated. Any other items for discussion at this time, Madam Clerk, that you're aware of? I'm going to ask that we then take a motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we also have a recess meeting that we were scheduled to start at 4 o'clock. It's 4:45. I'm going to ask that we take about a 2-minute break, and then we will come back for that recessed meeting.